Hello and welcome to the developer question and answer session for Stormworks. We're just going to get started in a moment when I figure out how to get my media source to play. Why are you not playing? Come on.
Welcome to Club Deltars. Same
Hello
issue half the time.
to the developer. Why does my video not want to play? This is annoying. Ah, here we go. Right, we're off. Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much for coming to join us. We are going to be answering your questions live. I am determined to try and get through as many as possible. Last time we only got through half. I would like to get through everyone's questions, so we are going to go for it. So if you answer a question, there is no rush. We will shuffle the page throughout the session, so we'll just reorder them so that even if you're not, we're not going to answer the questions in the order they were asked. We'll randomize them so that you get a fair chance of having your question answered, but hopefully we'll get through them all anyway. And otherwise, yeah, let's get going. So you can ask your questions at geometer.co.uk/questions. So yeah, you get them posted in there, and I think, how does it work? I think there's a maximum length to the question. We've kind of set a maximum length to the text box, and you get one question per copy of Stormworks. So you log in through with your Steam ID as you would if you were on the support track or whatever, and of course you can then ask your question, and of course you do get just one question each. So yeah, that's that. So let's get started. There's already quite a few questions asked, so I will click the shuffle button. Questions have been shuffled into a random order. So alright, let's have a look. Okay, the first question by Neshok: will there be more weapons DLC content, like more weapon types, ammo, etc.? I think this came up last time. I think somebody asked for a specific ammo type for one of the weapons that wasn't available, and I did note that down. We did discuss it. I'm not sure even when that'll get developed, but we would consider that stuff. And to be honest, anything can be expanded. I guess, to be candid, I don't think we've got much or any weapons content planned at the moment in development. But it's an ongoing process, so stuff can get added. So I'll say I could rule it out for the next 6 months, but we're very open to adding more weapons DLC content. Sometimes the DLC content is a little bit tricky to do in terms of adding things on for players who, it's actually the weapons DLC is very well adopted. A lot of players got it, so if there's a DLC we're going to add content to, that makes the most sense, and I think we would be serving a great many players if we did that. So yes, I'm very open to that. Mark answered. And the next question: are wheel physics planning on being changed, mainly in regarding to the grip? So the answer is yes. What's going on here is that we did the wheels rework ages ago. If you remember, it was on experimental. It wasn't very popular because of the conservation of energy changes that we made. Basically, the existing wheels don't have great conservation of energy when compared to the other force emitter parts, like the propeller and the rotor blades and other parts like that. So you'll find that if you use a propeller versus using wheels, you'll find that the wheels will get your vehicle moving a lot faster. There's a conservation of energy kind of mismatch there, and so we were looking at slowing the wheels down a bit with that update. That was very unpopular, so we decided to kind of back off on that update for a while. I think our plan is basically to revisit this update, but try and get it so the wheel balance feels more or less the same as it is now. Obviously, we can't kind of change the code behind wheels, and wheels behave exactly the same, so we're always in this kind of conflict, I suppose, where there's the conflict between, like, us not changing anything and everything staying the same, and then players asking us to change stuff, and players asking us to change stuff, and then we do change it, and then other players are confused. No, I didn't want things to change. So it can be a bit difficult for us to do like a broad-ranging rebalance on an existing opponent that's been in the game for a while. I think we are going to try. We're going to be very careful to try and minimize the balance change. Obviously, if there's suddenly wheels start to be grippy, then that's obviously going to change the behaviour of basically all wheeled vehicles. We'll try and keep it under control. We don't want to wreck anyone's creations, but it's just difficult. Right, let's carry on. Mark answered. Can you add a container spawn at the Tajin docks? We can fly from FJ to Tajin with cargo. I see, that's quite interesting. Yes, anything's possible. We are actually planning some more container style mission stuff. I won't taste too much on that yet, that's still in development, but we've got some new ideas for missions, and I think we're not planning on specifically adding container spawn at Tajin docks, but we are planning on doing I guess logistics missions stuff in the future, so expect that in the next 6 months, I would say. Mark answered. Will EXE modding ever be supported without being banned, such as a warning that says it's modded? So I think with this EXE modding stuff, I'm not sure we have banned anyone for modding their EXE file. I'm just trying to think here exactly. Yeah, no, I don't think we've banned anyone for modding their EXE file. I would say if you're modding your EXE file, I suppose, and then going and playing online and perhaps getting an unfair advantage, then that is cheating and you could potentially be game banned for that. But if you're not cheating, then we haven't ever banned anyone for that, I don't think. But I would probably, to be on the safe side, say if you're going to mod your EXE file, just don't play online, in case it is interpreted as cheating. But we've not banned anyone for modding specifically the EXE file before. Will we ever get crab pots for fishing? So I would hope so. We are planning on doing another fishing major update, and crab pots were a popular request. We've been having a lot of fun with the fishing updates, and we've had a lot of players give us feedback on that stuff. Yeah, we're very pleased to carry on working on that stuff. Thank you for all the feedback, and we will be certainly for the next fishing major update. We're only planning one more fishing major update. We'll try and do as much fishing stuff in there. We've obviously had 2 fishing major updates. We don't want to overdo it. But we're very pleased to carry on with that stuff. I'm just mindful that we need to do other stuff as well, but I think players have been very receptive to the fishing. I think it's worked quite well in Stormworks, and I am really enjoying seeing the fishing ships. They are very awesome. There's some in this video here. This is a pre-recorded video, by the way, so I cannot talk and play at the same time. That is out of the question. So we just shot this afternoon. Myself and one other developer, and yeah, we just got about an hour 15 of footage here that should play on a loop, and yeah, we had a great time with it. So these are creations I think are quite high up on the workshop at the moment, quite popular creations off the workshop. We just kind of set up a little kind of mission file, an add-on file, and then we just kind of test the locations one at a time. And yeah, the creations are absolutely brilliant. So some of these fishing ships are just beautiful. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Will there ever be improvements to microcontroller lure, such as an increased character limit? Potentially. I think I've seen some of the creations where you basically put some of the lure content in the properties box and put it as an input for the Lua microcontroller, and people are making video players with that, which is it's just amazing, right? It's amazing. So we have seen that stuff. Is there a point in the 4K limit, considering people can just do that kind of thing? Maybe we could pump that up. I think we'd be interested to say, well, okay, what's enough? 8192? Do we go to 16K characters? 16K characters enough? I mean, 16K is quite a lot more. Probably could support that. File size can be an issue, but it's quite a lot of effort to write 16K controller. The original, I think the 4K limit really is just because controllers were very much kind of always intended to be kind of a drop-in for kind of the situation where you might use an Arduino or something, and obviously Arduino doesn't have huge memory capacity itself. They're intended to be microcontrollers that are doing some simple logical function. Obviously there's all the rendering and stuff that's in the game, and other players are doing amazing stuff with the Lua controllers. So maybe that's a good thing. I suppose the thing that just makes us nervous about it is that, yeah, fine, if you made a 16,000 character controller and it was great, awesome. I think the problem is that some players might decide, well, they're going to slap 50 of those controllers on a single vehicle, and the vehicle is basically going to really struggle in performance, and then we get blamed for that. And I think that's just the nature of some of this Stormworks stuff, where you can build stuff in the way you want, and it's almost like a CAD software, it's almost like a developer tool, and it is possible to make stuff with bad performance, and we're trying to, I guess, reduce the scope of going outside that. But I'm sure you can make very slow Lua controller with 4K characters, probably a lot less, so maybe there is no harm in doing that. I will make a note now of some of these things. So Lua character limit, I've written that one down, thank you very much. What does your testing process look like? Is it automated or is there manual testing? Explain, please. So the testing process involves, we basically, our process starts out often on the support tracker, or otherwise having a development plan, and we'll promote a issue onto our task board. Our task board's a bit like Trello, but it's not. It's a custom one, but it's to explain it, it's a bit like a Kanban board kind of thing, and that creates like a task to be worked on, and we kind of track all the information on that task, and that then gets developed, and then it gets moved into its testing phase. It gets moved into the kind of the testing column, if you like, and then the testing starts, and the tasks are typically now promoted into the testing phase, I would say at least 4 to 6 weeks before release. Sometimes it's less if it's a recent issue that we've created, but if it's an old issue or a new feature, then we typically give testing 4 to 6 weeks. And then, yeah, our testing engineer will go in, and they've got plenty of time to look at all of that stuff. There'll be often test vehicles created, or otherwise we'll be using test vehicles submitted by players on the issue tracker, or otherwise there'll be kind of like a testing procedure that we go through there in order to check that out. There's also some checklists behind the scenes as well, where for specific feature types, there's some things like creating a component, for example. We've got a checklist of stuff that where we go through, and we just go through the checklist of, okay, have we got this right for this component, or this and this, and have we done all the whole list, because there's quite a lot of small little bits that are related to releasing a new component, for example, and we just go through that, and if we make a mistake, we go back to the checklist, we add it on and make sure that the item is on the checklist so we don't make that mistake again. So yeah, then there's the that is the testing process. We've also got some automated testing in that we've got the unit tests, and this is typically so that sometimes when we're doing a fix, we'll first of all create a unit test so that we get actual numbered metrics out, because once you change something, you've got a good jump back and forward between versions to see, okay, what was the behavior before, what was the behavior after. And in a game with Stormworks where there's so many different metrics around a component, not just like its mass or its weight, but often like with an engine, like the fuel consumption, there's the air consumption, the exhaust production, there's the power output, and then all in the different environments as well. And then obviously there's the turbo behavior. That's one we fixed recently where we had the engines working correctly, but actually if you were using high pressure air input, they started to behave differently to how they had before, and we had to fix that. And I think in that case we did actually create a unit test, and we created the turbo engines unit test, and we got that set up. Then we developed the feature, then it goes into testing, and then there's a certain number of weeks of time where the tester can go through and check it's correct, and stuff often gets moved back, and we look at it again, and then we move it forward again. So that is more or less our testing process. Will gimbal input for radars, for uncaged missiles for example, be added? I don't know. I think I see. So I'm not entirely 100% sure what an uncaged missile is, but I'm imagining that basically it involves radaring a target that is you're trying to intercept, and it's to the left or the right of you or something, and you're not flying towards the target, you're flying towards the intercept point, and therefore you want to gimbal your radar over to the left or the right. I'm not sure. That is quite a specific request. So I'm not going to say never, but we're not planning on adding that to the list of features that we're going to implement right now. I will carry on. Will we get official blocks and parts modding support in the future? Well, you'll have to wait and see, but that is something we are very interested in doing. Certainly there's some incredible mods that the community has been coming up with without official support. I think everyone would like it if there was better official support for that and they were available on the workshop, because obviously that's going to make it a lot easier for people to subscribe to your mods, and it's going to make it a lot easier to basically distribute your mods to players. So that would be a very good thing for us to do, and we do support that. And yeah, I'm very impressed with a lot of the actual file modding stuff that isn't one of the supported mod types. Is very, very impressive, especially the environment ones where people have created new components, new maps and stuff. Like some of the racing circuits are amazing. So yeah, it would be great to get that as like an official moddable aspect of the game. We'll see what we can do in the future. When will there be more quality of life updates? We'd appreciate more of them. So I mean, I think that if you look at our patch note history, you can go into the Stormworks community, and then there's on the Steam store page you can click on the news button. You can also go to the community hub and click on news, and that lists all of the news announcements. If you go into there, you can see all of the releases. We obviously do a patch every 2 weeks there, so you can read the patch notes for every patch that happens every 2 weeks. And what you'll find is that with every patch there are quality of life improvements. So yeah, I'm pleased to announce that. It is a bit of a phenomenon that often we do add one feature to these updates, and there'll be like 5 or 8 bug fixes on one feature, and all of a sudden players like, oh, where's the bug fixes? I don't get it. I think a lot of the people in the comments don't get it. But yeah, there's actually quality of life fixes, there's bug fixes and improvements every update we do, which happens every 2 weeks. Occasionally there's a new feature in there as well. So rarely there's several new features. That's usually a major update now. But yeah, we're constantly improving the quality every 2 weeks with the updates. Will we ever get a composite pivot input for radars similar to lasers or cameras? I see. Very similar request. I'll note that down there. Composite input for radar gimbal. I I will note that down, but otherwise that's a duplicate, I think. Will there be further improvements to fishing? Yes, so the answer is yes, as discussed before. When we were talking about the crab pots, we will do a third major update for fishing. Obviously the major updates are a bit smaller than they used to be, but I think that's a very good thing, because I think we're better with higher quality, better tested, and kind of less stressed updates than in the past. And certainly the last few major updates have gone a lot smoother, so we are quite enjoying that. And ultimately we are still managing to do kind of meaningful changes, so we're really enjoying that. So yes, there will be another major update for fishing. The next question: when will you improve the commodities and missions? Career isn't very enjoyable at the moment. Well, commodities and missions. So we did recently do a missions change, didn't we? I've forgotten what was the new mission type. We've got a few more in progress, which is why I've lost track of which one we've released. But we've got a few different missions updates planned and on the way. And they'll be getting released over the next 6 months. Yeah, we're just constantly adding more stuff to do in the world. I suppose if you're playing the tutorial, like the basic, like, you know, the career mode, where you're starting on the island, we're very happy to listen to feedback, and if people have specific missions they'd like, or a little bit more detail on exactly how they want that experience to play out, then yeah, we're very happy to hear from you, and certainly let us know, perhaps on the support tracker with a feature request. We'd be very happy to know exactly what that vision is, because it is a challenge delivering kind of, like, you know, action-packed career. We have been slowly expanding it, so there's more and more and more stuff that you can do now in career. There's the rescue missions, the delivery missions, there's the cargo transport with the containers and stuff. We did add the animal missions, I think, did we recently? I don't want to start saying missions in case it's one of the ones we haven't added, but I think we've slowly been extending the things you can do in the world. A lot of it is kind of transport based, move object A to position B. Some of them are a bit more interesting, where there's a bit more of a dynamic or a bit more danger at a specific location. But yeah, we're very happy to carry on thinking about looking at that. So yeah, please do let us know your specific feedback. That's what I had on my page. I'll click refresh now, see how many we've got. Okay, we've got 3 pages. What I'll do is I'll just click shuffle, and then I'll refresh again, and there we go. Okay, so I've now just mixed them up a bit, and we'll carry on through. The next question from Mer is, what's the next big thing or DLC coming to Stormworks? We prefer not to announce it too far ahead. I think I have given a couple of hints already in this stream, but we haven't announced the dates yet, and we haven't announced specifically what's going to be in those updates. But as I said before, we are planning another fishing update, and we are working on other major updates as well. And to be honest, we're quite fortunate in this respect. There's just quite a lot of interesting things we can do. There's still a lot of great places we can expand that. I'm just looking at the stream here. The the creator got me. There's the exploding toilet on this creation, and they absolutely got me. I clicked it, and yeah, we'll see. We do try and save this vehicle, but I can see in chat we're asking for hints. I think we've given some good hints there, that there's potential for more fishing, and we are open to other major update ideas too. And yeah, we've got some stuff in progress. We've got some ideas that we've not started working on yet. But I don't really want to announce it yet. I think it's probably better for just the player's experience if we announce it close to the time, because there's less anticipation, I suppose, and we prefer to do rather than talk. If you understand what I mean by that, I think it's a bit more comfortable to just be the kind of a developer that just does stuff rather than necessarily talks about stuff a lot. So that is our strategy there. Will you build expressways, motorways with multiple lanes? Probably not. I don't know whether we're going to do any more location updates, simply because they're not massively popular, and I think a bit of feedback we do get from players already is with our location updates that we have done. There's enough locations already in the game, and there's already quite a lot of places you can go to. There's quite a lot of types of place you can visit. The more built up spaces might just start to feel a little bit more empty because there wouldn't be traffic on the roads. So does that fully make sense? I'm not sure. So we're not planning on doing it, but that said, we would like to see the kind of the environment modding stuff become part of the game. And in that respect, I suppose I'm suggesting that players might be able to mod that stuff in themselves if that's what they're into. But I don't think we're planning on doing more massive location updates. Maybe some small ones, but not the big ones we've been doing in the past, like the Arid major update and so on, or the Arid DLC. The Industrial Frontier, that one wasn't it? Next question: will there be more sound-focused updates such as new jet sounds, muffled sound in vehicles, etc.? I don't know. I think we might have some sound effects in the bag that are waiting to be integrated, so there may be some sound-focused updates. The sound filters for in vehicles and stuff, I mean, I do like the sound of this. Like, we've already got the data for like which compartments you're in, you know, because you've obviously got the sealed compartments, like when you're in a submarine and so on. We kind of have that data so that we can not have water in that space and things. So, you know, it's possible for us to say, oh well, sounds sound different if they're in a different room or whatever. That could be cool, but that's not currently in development, but that might be something that's possible. But sounds have generally been quite difficult for us. They are a challenge, and I think a lot of the sound libraries, sometimes you have sounds that are overdone, where there's just loads of resources for sounds you can use in a game, and then other times there are very difficult to get sound resources, where it's very difficult to get these sound libraries for a specific time of sound effect. I know that engines have been a massive problem from a development point of view in the past, where just the sound libraries are just very scarce and very limited, especially for a format like Stormworks, where you kind of want the sounds in layers, but they just don't get recorded like that, you know, because someone records an engine, they record all the parts of the engine, so it's very difficult to get that broken down into the layers so that we can, you know, have that interactive engine that is playing multiple different layers of sound for stuff. So it has been difficult to do the sound updates, but it is possible there will be more sound updates in the future. I don't think we've got anything on the board at the moment for the next 6 months, certainly, but everything's possible, nothing's planned. We might have some sound effects, however, that are waiting to be integrated lower down on our tasks list. I'm not sure. Many components are too expensive and relatively heavy. Is there any hope for rebalancing by Ure and Wind? There is hope for rebalancing, yes. I think we would be happy to look at this. I'm just it does remind me of a task that I think we discussed at some point, where a developer agreed they were going to have a look at some rebalancing. I can't remember exactly what it was. But I think if you do create a support ticket with specific stuff you want rebalancing, we'll certainly discuss it, and it's very possible that we would implement that. That's obviously very easy for us to do, right? It's just changing some numbers. It is just changing some numbers. It's also possible that if there was broader modding support in the future, that it'd be very easy for players to create mods. That changes the cost and weight of components, but I mean, you really want to get the vanilla game as well balanced as possible. So yeah, we're very open for that. I think generally blocks are meant to be in that kind of 1 mass to 1 block to 10 mass to 1 block kind of range, so 1 to 10 mass per block, depending on exactly what the block is. And certainly the price is something we're happy to look at as well, because obviously, you know, it's a career only thing, but you know, we want to get to career to work as well as possible. So yeah, there is hope. Do you plan to introduce a hydraulic mechanism that operates only with dedicated fluids? Hydraulics. We don't have a plan for this. I would love it. It's something we've talked about in the studio, and I mean, to be honest, it's something we're considering for the new game. I think for the Stormworks situation, it's a little bit tricky because of how components are built with the block building system, and unfortunately in Bullet there's no point-to-point distance constraint, whereas in other physics libraries, such as the one we're using for the new game, there is. So at that point we've got to write our own physics code, which is a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. It's an area of specialty that we've not really done before. We have modified Bullet quite a bit for Stormworks, but we've never written a constraint before, and I think there's very specific maths that works and very specific maths that doesn't work. So there'll be quite a lot of learning to do that. So that is a kind of a technical blocking aspect of the hydraulic mechanisms in Stormworks. It's quite difficult, that one, unfortunately, but it would be awesome, right? Hydraulics are amazing. I watch a lot of hydraulic stuff on YouTube. But I don't know if there's any Farmcraft watchers in chat. Let me know. But yeah, I've learned a lot about hydraulics watching that YouTube channel. I would love to see it in a building game, but it's gonna take a little bit of time and effort in Stormworks. Let's mark that as answered. Next question. Can we get ammo belts for machine guns and autocannon so we can finally build proper turrets? I suppose this is this flexible ammo belt stuff, isn't it? I think we've answered this a few times. I think the answer really is that it's just a physics constraint. It's just a bit of a pain. We're hesitant against this one, not because it's necessarily impossible, but because it basically involves adding a bunch of physics objects or otherwise kind of coming up with some kind of like flexible rope style thing that is going to render as kind of like a very, very stiff rope that is basically linking in a specific way. Would be awesome. It's not impossible, but I don't know. I think it's probably a little bit on the difficult side. There's a lot of things that will probably make a bigger impact that would be easy for us, so we're not quite at the point of just doing these slightly difficult things. And sometimes these slightly difficult things kind of create more bugs than we'd rather like, so we do shy away from them at the moment. I do agree it is an awesome suggestion, and it's a suggestion we've had a lot, so it would be great to do it. We don't have a plan to do it at the moment. It's possible, but it's probably further down the line, probably not this year. Next question. Over the last year of development, is there a specific moment during development that positively ? I don't think that's a full sentence. This has possibly got submitted too early. I'm not sure what that means. Yeah, sorry. It's I don't understand. I think possibly pressed enter to press submit too early there. Next question. Can we paint the rotor blade accents, especially the red tail and spiral on the rotor? So that's a good question. They're moving parts, but you can paint moving parts, can't you? Can you? I think you can. You can certainly paint secondary meshes. Like there's the base mesh, and then there's the mesh part that moves. And certainly we did add support, I think, for some points, so that you can paint colours on the stuff that moves, not just the base mesh that doesn't move. So it's possible that we could add support for that. So yeah, please do create a feature request, and we can consider that. Paintable accents. I'll just note it down as well, but please do create a feature request if you would. Paintable accents on rotor blades. Thank you for your question. Next question. Will more train parts become available, for example, inside cylinders or diesel cranks? Okay, I'm just going to have to read this one again and think what it means. train parts, for example, inside cylinders or diesel cranks. More train parts. I see, so we're talking about kind of... So I don't really know my trains that well. I mean, they're very specific engine types, aren't they? You've got like the diesel electric stuff, and then obviously you've got the steam. I don't know whether you get straight diesel or whether all diesel trains are actually diesel electric. You've certainly got your electric trains too. There's a lot of stuff that goes in. It's very specific engineering, isn't it? I mean, we do like supporting this stuff. It's just we are getting to a very specific zone where I guess you're making something that's very specific to a train, and obviously that's not really been part of Stormworks in the past, where a lot of components do have like a general application, but you know, maybe a large engine, this kind of engine, could potentially be relevant to ships and so on. Revisiting engines, I don't know whether I've got the energy for it. The modular engine stuff, I think I said last time, has been a bit of a point of regret. It was difficult to balance it, and they are still a bit overheaty, but it's difficult to change that because there's just the aspect of I suppose changing people's creations. We just, you know, it's the absolute worst thing we can do. So I don't know whether we'll be revisiting more engine parts, but it could happen in the future. We don't have it on the board right now, but if there is interest in the future for more train stuff in the future, we're happy to do it. We're having a great time with these components, and we do enjoy doing them. So, and I do like the trains as well. Trains are just so much fun to see in Stormworks. Like some of the player creations, they always look great. The player creations are just brilliant for trains. Yeah, thank you very much. We are open to improving trains. I don't know whether we're going to be adding specific train parts in the next 6 months. Love the game, thank you very much. But any plans on expanding SAR missions / adding more immersive AI characters? We don't have plans specifically on SAR missions, I don't think. No, we added the Man Overboard missions, didn't we? So I suppose that is a SAR mission. We are certainly open to doing it. I think we'd really appreciate, I guess, a little bit of help. If you've got a specific idea for what the SAR mission experience could be like, do open a feature request, let us know. I think we'd be really happy to hear from you. Adding more immersive AI characters, I don't know about that either. I think probably not. I think a lot of this content stuff can be quite tricky to do, in terms of creating a more immersive character. It could be tricky, so I'm not sure whether we can. I mean, I'm guessing kind of conversational dialogue and so on. It just could be a big challenge and a big feature that potentially doesn't really fit with the rest of the flow of the game. But we'd love to give you some better SAR missions. I think we're just looking for some player feedback on exactly what that should be. Next question, any chance for tank track rework, allowing different size wheels in one track, suspension, etc.? Yes, this is a great one. We don't have plans for that. It would be good, wouldn't it? It would be good. I'll note it down. Tank tracks with different radiuses, different radii, I guess you'd say, and also I suppose we're talking about I guess you kind of in tracks you kind of get drive wheels and non-drive wheels, don't you? And also I suppose what's also is in the request here, different radii and suspension. Okay, just note that down. I think it's a great suggestion, and it's probably not that painfully difficult, to be honest. It's probably something we could do without too much trouble. I'll discuss it with the team. Will you ever add velocity pivots with power fluid output input? Velocity pivot. Right, do we not have them? That's unfortunate, isn't it? I suppose there kind of should be. I mean, I don't know whether they exist in real life. I know a lot of the ones you get in real life have got like a cable in them. They're not necessarily like a circular bearing style connector, but they do exist, don't they? You can get circular bearing style connectors. They're just usually not. They usually got a cable inside them that's wrapping around the axis, so it's got a maximum turn. I think hydraulic vehicles like excavators and stuff have like a maximum number of times you can turn them as well. I'm not 100% sure if they've got like the ring bearing things, they've got the contact points that way. It's a good idea, really, isn't it? I'll note that one down as well. So velocity pivots with power fluid data. Okay. Oh, we've probably already got data, haven't we? So just power and fluid, I think. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Will audio logic be updated as it stands? It's only used is in multiplayer. Maybe add synth lure. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? Like waveform generation. I don't know. We're getting very off the theme of Stormworks, but I do enjoy that stuff. I think the problem, I suppose, is you're talking about a audio wave, which is a lot of data. It's like 44 kilohertz, is it? So you're talking about 44,000 data points per second, and I think normally audio is 2 bytes per data point. So you're generating 88 kilobytes of data per second, which is quite a lot for Lua, so I don't think that's going to work. Lua's not fast enough, unfortunately, to do kind of like audio synth. I think you need it built in. Although maybe we could build it in the C++, so maybe we could just have an API for controlling the waveform. That would be cool. That would be cool, wouldn't it? I'll note it down. It is a bit of a specific one. Lua audio synth generation. I think we're going to find that's a little bit technically tricky. Is it going to work in multiplayer and so on? It might be more effort than it's worth, but I do like it. It's a cool idea. Certainly no promises. Unlikely, to be completely honest. It's probably unlikely, but I do like it. I will discuss it with the team. Next question. Would Stormworks ever get a VR DLC? It's unlikely. I think the issue with the VR stuff is, there's quite a few issues. One is, I guess, the small installer base just means that it's generally a bit poorly supported. Not necessarily by developers, but by the SDKs and so on. I know we did VR for Carrier Command, and stuff is constantly breaking, even though we've not changed the game code, but suddenly Oculus players are having an issue with the controller, and it's because the API is broken. They've done an update and it's broken on the API or something, and it's frustrating. So I don't really want to do too much work in that kind of poorly supported space. And I guess the other thing is that it's very performance dependent. Remember, you've got to render the game at twice per eye, and you can't go low on frame rate, otherwise people will get a headache. So that's probably a bad idea, because it's just going to be very performance dependent. It's going to be difficult to deliver the frame rate that would be required. And I suppose the next thing as well is that people are going to be vomiting up all over their headsets, because like with the motion sickness stuff, you get in a boat with your Stormworks VR, and you're going to get real seasickness, aren't you? It's going to be the kind of experience that we can't quite control, like you would expect a normal VR game to kind of keep that within kind of constraints with Stormworks, because you can go and do all these different things. It might be uncomfortable. Thank you very much. Let's go to the next question. Will we ever get 2 wide small tank tracks? I swear to God we've got these. This came up last time, and I'm sure we've got 1 wide tank tracks, 2 wide tank tracks, and 3 wide tank tracks. I'm just sure we've got them. I'm sure they're in the game. I went in and discussed it with developers, and we weren't sure. I can't remember if we looked or not. I'm sure there's 2 wide tank tracks already, but a lot of players seem to think there aren't, so maybe they've gone missing somewhere. I'm sure we did this update. I am sure there are 2 wide tank tracks. When we say small tank tracks, is that the radius of the wheel perhaps? I'm not sure. I've certainly already got that noted down if it is, because someone's already asked for tank tracks with different radii and suspension. So I guess I've already noted that down. So I see. I imagine you're suggesting that you just want a small radius wheel, and you're not contesting that there's 2 wide tank tracks. Yeah, I suppose it's very possible we could just add some different radii wheels for the various tank tracks, and maybe even suspension pieces. That'd be a pretty nice minor update. I do like it. Let's. I see. Yeah. So someone in the chat has said 2 wide, 3x3 is what we want, not 2 wide, 5x5. Yeah, very good point. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Certainly something we'll look at. We'll discuss that as part of that previous suggestion. Thank you. Any plans to add flow rate sensors? What about the overheating bug for oil distillation? Plans to add flow rate sensor. Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it? With the intermediate parts like a valve and so on, they can cause like a reduction in flow just because of how the fluid system works. But we could potentially just put a sensor on the existing valves data output if we've got the logic space for it. I think that would be easy enough to do. So flow rate sensor, flow rate data output on valves. I will note that down. That sounds like a good change that we could potentially make. Thank you. 454, thank you very much. And the next question, will pressure be fixed? Open door should equals presimmed. If damage lets H2O in, should let air out. Right. So we've had various fixes since we did the Space DLC, and there was a lot wrong when we released, and then we fixed it and there was still a lot wrong. We did fix the major stuff that would stop playing you the game pretty quickly, but then we kept kind of finding various different contexts where the behavior didn't make sense, and so we've carried on fixing it. Certainly we did find that there was some problems in space, but the last fix we did was a couple of months ago. I don't think we found anything that doesn't work how we would expect. The pressure localization, it is a little bit on the slow side, but I think that's kind of on purpose to kind of communicate to the player what's happening rather than it being a very sudden thing. That you open the door and there's air inside and there's a constant flow of air going outside, for example, if you're in space, and that's kind of on purpose to slow that mechanic down just so players have a bit more time to react to what's going on, so they've got a chance to close their door before they lose all of their air, for example. And certainly with like under the water situations, for example, if you open a door, then water will flood in, but it will also displace the air in the compartment, which will then get pushed out, and the air will get exhausted as the water pushes in, and that is a mechanic. So we think it's working. If it's not for you, then please do file a bug request, and we're happy to consider. But as far as I know at the moment, it is working as intended, and it does generally just make sense in the situations that we've been looking at. It seems to behave how you want. I do occasionally see a report that the flow is very low in certain situations. That That's not been our experience in testing. So you've certainly got a example vehicle that you can share with us that's simple enough that we're able to look at it and understand what's happening, then that'll be a big help, and we'll be happy to look at this. Yeah, we're very happy to look at the bugs. I think it's just a question of us being able to reproduce it. So if you can help us reproduce it, then we're very happy to take action and get those fixes done. Thank you very much. I will go on to page 2. Will dual wheels be added in some way? Maybe wheels with power nodes on both sides. So yeah, the old double wheel for trucks and stuff, that is something we discussed actually just last week. It's something we're open to doing. We haven't done it yet. I don't like talking about features that we haven't actually developed yet, but I imagine we did discuss it, and we did say, well, could we have like a checkbox on wheels, for example? So it's because you can go to the properties of a regular wheel to change its radius. Maybe there could also be an option for changing it to a double wheel, and so on. That would be good. With power nodes on both sides, so that's interesting. So are we talking about dual wheels with power nodes on both sides so that they chain? I suppose we were thinking about the double wheel for like a truck. I'm not sure if there's another use case here, but certainly we were thinking, because a lot of players are needing this, and there's a lot of XML editing to get it to work. We were thinking of just properly supporting it and just adding a option on existing wheels so that you can just have a double tyre rather than a single tyre, which is, I think, what most players want. So if that's what you're looking for, then we are seriously considering adding that as a minor update in the next 6 months, hopefully, but we haven't worked on it yet. And with all of these things, we might get to working on it, and then there's just some bizarre situation where it's actually a lot more difficult than you would think. So these things can get cancelled at this phase, but I do support the idea, and I would like us to do it sooner rather than later. Yeah, sorry to be a bit wishy-washy on the is something going to happen, isn't it? I obviously want to be positive about stuff, and a lot of this stuff we are planning on doing, but until it's done and it's tested and it's ready for release, I just don't want anyone to get disappointed. So that's why I guess I'm taking the line that I am of trying to be non-committal on things. Any plan for a higher precision update for guns? Yes, there is. I think it got asked for last time, didn't it? And I noted it down, and I discussed it with the team, and we created a task, and it should hopefully happen at some point this year. Next question: will aerodynamic hydrodynamic drag be reworked for higher efficiency, lower load on engine? So I do agree it would be better if the water was less treacly and the air was less treacly, and generally there's a bit more of a realism balance there. However, I guess the challenge with Stormworks, as we've said before, and it's the same answer I've given many times, is that we're trying to build everything from the same set of blocks. So your different vehicles are all made from the same types of blocks, and that's not how real vehicles are made, right? Aircraft are made from very specific type of engineering, often aircraft grade aluminium, and then you've got trucks that are made from a lot of heavy steel. You've got trains that are obviously, you're taking that steel and you're making it 4 times thicker. You've got like just a train wheel is probably heavier than a lot of aircraft. So you've just got very different mechanical engineering properties on different types of vehicle, and so just generalizing that with a single set of blocks to gamify it in many sense doesn't make sense, and that's kind of how we've ended up in this situation where we're trying to make this slightly nerfed version of physics in order that your various vehicles might not behave exactly how they would in the real world, but they all kind of work and they're all kind of interactive and can exist in the same simulation, and it's actually quite a challenging thing to do. So it's very difficult. Then there's also the argument, can we actually change aerodynamic hydrodynamic? It's going to destroy a lot of vehicles. As you saw when we did the space DLC and there was the buoyancy change, it didn't affect all vehicles. It did only affect specific vehicles that we usually had, I think it was the situation where it was vehicles that had very, very heavy parts and then very light parts as well. So typically larger ships. Some smaller ships were affected too, but they would typically have like lots of small multi-body parts or something. It was like a specific criteria, and it was like the worst backlash ever. We can't be changing the fundamental mechanics of the game because it's just going to break every vehicle on the workshop. And unfortunately, a lot of players, well, it's not unfortunately, it's very, very reasonable and very understandable, is that players are sensitive to their vehicle behavior changing when they've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours. So it's difficult. What I will say is, in a future game, I would like to achieve a different balance that I think we've had feedback from many players in the past. But yeah, that's basically the feedback on that. I think it's just very difficult for us to do, so it's not 100% ruled out, but it's very unlikely, I think, for us to do. I certainly do agree with the player here, and I think it would be better if we just had better hydrodynamics. I think we might be better thinking about a future game for that stuff where it's more achievable. Retrofitting that onto an existing game that's been out, we're in 7th year of live development now. Are we really going to change the way 7 years worth of player vehicles behave? It's a bad idea. Next question, when will more building blocks be added that everyone has been asking for and wanting for I imagine that says a long time. I don't know. You'd have to be a bit more specific. I'm not sure what more building blocks that everyone's been asking for means. But certainly, if you've got a specific block you want, you can always file a feature request. If you're talking, I don't want to start guessing what you're talking about. It could be anything. So I will move on. Thank you. Would it be possible to get pivots that move using RPS? I suppose we've got the robotic parts, which is like the pivots and the hinges and so on, and then we've obviously got the torque parts, which is like wheels and tank tracks. And I suppose the suggestion here is that we're going to go across, and I mean, I think that's a good idea. I think being able to go from one thing to another is great. I think it's just the energy conservation stuff. I mean, I'll reflect on this saying that's kind of, it's something we've been thinking about with a new game. The problem you get very quickly is that it's very difficult to get conservation of energy using your physics engine constraints. When it's a wheel, we're writing our own code. It's reasonably straightforward because you're creating forces directly. With a lot of the robotic parts, there's like a driver in there which is adjusting its power based on what you're telling it to do, not how much energy you're rather than what you've like. Yeah, but I don't know. I think probably not is the answer, just because it's difficult from an energy conservation point of view. Yeah, I'm not really sure what the use case for this is. It might be, it could be anything. I suppose it could be like a paddle steamer or something where you could say, okay, actually that would make a lot of sense. I think it's just a question of us getting conservation of energy right, but maybe it is possible, you know. I will note that down. So what we're saying, torque based pivots. I'll tell you what, we will discuss it because it is a fair point. The more I think about it, maybe it is something we can deliver. Certainly we'll be just looking at how popular the feature is, because we've obviously got to prioritise this by what's going to make the best impact for the most players. It's not frequently requested, but yeah, it probably is possible. Not currently planned, but is possible as you've asked. Will the radar noise ever be removed? People are creating incredibly accurate radar-based missiles and the like with the existing radar noise system. I suppose we're trying to avoid the situation where I suppose radar can be used for exact positioning it's trying to have that kind of slight level of realism as you might get with a real radar system, in order to just get it so that the radar systems that are created in game do have some level of quality that can be likened to real radar systems in the real world, where there's so you're just getting the same kind of constraints and the same challenges in developing the systems, so that they behave in the same way, and you just kind of get that derivative quality to them where they are a little bit similar. Someone has suggested quick fire questions for the last 5-10 minutes. I'll just answer this question and I'll come back to this. Will the radar remove? Probably not. It's not planned, and I don't think there's too much radar noise there, and certainly there's plenty of players who are able to just create the most incredibly accurate and effective radar missiles currently with the existing system. And yeah, we're just trying to create that some kind of balance in order to get the derivative behavior. Let's have a look. Oh my god. Okay, we're only on page 2 and we've got to get to page 5. Let's do a shuffle. Sorry if you're the next person to ask a question. I am going to still try and get through them, and we will put the hammer down and try and do. I think we've got enough time for. I can stay here for another half an hour, so let's get going. And I'm just going to try and answer as many as I possibly can. Can you add buzzers with a composite input so that pitch, instrument, and volume is varied? We could do composite input, buzzer, composite. Input. Noted down. It's possible. Obviously, we've already got the properties, haven't we? I'll move on. Any more handheld items like jerry cans? Also, a chance of cables, pulleys being able to go through something. Handheld items like jerry cans. I suppose the design point of view here is that we are struggling with our consumable items because there's not really a way to recharge them or kind of loot them or discover them in the game. So you just spawn everything, don't you, from the workshop, and that's the mechanic of the game. Certainly I think that will be for a future game. I think it would make more sense in Stormworks. I don't think consumables will work well with the game design. And also with just the fuel handling just isn't a massive part of the game because everything gets spawned from the workbench, so there's not the real need to refuel vehicles on the go, and so it's not going to be a big done feature. So I don't know, I'm probably against adding more handheld items because they're very difficult to do, and the jerry cans as well. I'm not sure there's the demand, simply because that's not how most players play the game. Could you make fishing nets customizable for decoration, for example, paintable, opaque surface, etc.? We could do. It's probably quite tricky. I'll note it down, but it's probably going on the list of difficult, so probably not this year. Painting of fishing nets. There's also just the pixel data. It's quite heavy, uses up quite a lot of space in files, and size of vehicle file is also something we're quite sensitive to as well for Stormworks, so I don't know. Next question, will resource gathering such as mining ores and getting liquid like gas and oil be improved? I think it does work at the moment. I'm not entirely sure. I think mining ores is working well at the moment, and I think oil does also work, so I'm not sure. There's no specific request for a specific improvement there. I don't fully understand exactly what's being asked for. We're open to doing stuff, as I've said. I'd have to have a specific request really to respond. Next question, any updates on the Stormworks like game? Oh dear. So yeah, I'll give a quick update. I think the strategy has been to refer to it as not Stormworks 2, as being this kind of clever marketing strategy to kind of disconnect us between the new game and Stormworks. And the point really is for us to do a new game that isn't got all the baggage of Stormworks. So I'll quickly talk about this. Stormworks is continuing. It's continuing for the foreseeable future. It's not going to stop development because we do a new game, even if we do a new game that's a building game. And I think that's because Stormworks is always going to have its place, and it's always going to have its relevance as a specific type of building game. We're not really interested in making a Stormworks 2, mostly because there's already Stormworks. It's in its 7th year of live development. We were developing it for years before it actually even got released. So, I mean, you're talking about a game that's been in development for almost 10 years now, and when you consider that it takes 10 years to get Stormworks to where it is now, just consider how long it's going to take us to make Stormworks 2, a game which I think players would expect to be Stormworks and better. So it's going to take more than 10 years. So none of you guys want to wait 10 years, right? It's too long. I don't necessarily want to do it for 10 years either. So it's kind of like an impossible situation. And then I think you might say, well, how about you release Stormworks 2 as early access and just develop it in the same way you develop Stormworks? I think the problem is I think players aren't going to enjoy that. I think the player expectation for Stormworks 2 is that it's Stormworks but better. And it's just going to take too long to make. Stormworks has taken 10 years to get here. It's got so many features. It's got so many different stuff you can do in it. It's going to be very difficult to compete with Stormworks. And honestly, I don't think there's really a point. I think we're just going to end up making the same game. It's going to have a lot of the same limitations. So I think we're interested in making a different game, a fundamentally different game. The challenge we're getting is that everyone compares it to Stormworks because, we're the Stormworks developer, and it's going to have vehicle building in it. So you're talking about basically players thinking, well, how's it going to compare with Stormworks? I'm trying to understand it. I'm understanding it in the terms of being a Stormworks expert. A lot of you have many, many hours. It's just going to be too difficult. So I think we want to make a new building game, and I think there's a lot of cool stuff we can do, but I think it's going to be a huge challenge for us because of the expectation that we're making something that is in some way related to Stormworks. And what we want to do is we want to make a new building game that is doing a lot less to a much higher standard. And when I say a lot less, I mean a lot less. So, we've been in development for 10 years. For Stormworks, maybe we're adding 10% of those features, and maybe we're spending twice as long or 3 times longer on each feature to make it higher quality and more in depth. And then maybe we don't want to do all the features from Stormworks. Maybe we want to have some new ideas. So actually that's only going to be 5% of Stormworks, with then 50% of the new game being new stuff. And I think that for players makes a lot of sense because you don't need a Stormworks 2, you've already got Stormworks. Having a new experience that perhaps does things better and approaches building games in a different way would be interesting and engaging. But yeah, the big challenge is that we're going to get hammered, right? We're going to come out, everyone thinks it's going to be Stormworks 2, it's not, and everyone's going to be very upset with us. So I think that's just the risk. Carrier Command 2 went well. We did Carrier Command 2, but it's more obviously, it's not. Carrier Command 2 was never really compared to Stormworks, and every time someone discusses our new game, it's always in comparison to Stormworks. It's a very, very challenging problem for us. So I think we're going to stop calling it not Stormworks 2. We're just going to try and I guess talk about it perhaps with a proper name. Ah yes, the stream is frozen. Let's get that fixed. What's going on here? Can I skip forward? Oh, what's happened there? It's gone nuts. What on earth has happened here? It's just gone mad. Okay, I think it's fixed. What am I doing? Jesus. I have absolutely no idea what's going on here. It was working before, wasn't it? Ah. Okay, I think we're back up. I won't touch it again. I think it's working. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I used a few too many minutes there, didn't I? That has been answered. That's the new game. Do you have plans to rebalance the career mode economy and progression? Already asked by Yoran Wind, I think. And yes, we're very happy to look at that. I think some specific requests. What's too expensive? What's too cheap? And exactly how you want to measure progression. please do let us know. Would love to get feedback. Next question, will better performance or better looking tyres be added? The current tyres are terrible. Probably not. Are you going to add part deforming or detaching? Like if you hit something, parts will fall off. Vehicle destruction and damage is probably, well, it's not going to happen. I think it's because there's a certain phase when you spawn your vehicle, it does some calculations behind the scenes, particularly for buoyancy, where there's a buoyancy generation phase. There's also a physics optimization phase, and this just it's not that slow, but it can take half a second or so. For bigger vehicles, it can take longer, and I think if you're talking about breaking vehicles up and changing their buoyancy properties and their physics properties, then that means that data needs to get recalculated, and that's going to basically freeze the game for half a second potentially, which is obviously not the experience you want. For Stormworks, it's a bit on the difficult side, so probably dynamic damage, probably not. It's probably going to be like the non-breaking off part physics, that damage system that we've currently got, I think is the best damage system for Stormworks. Unfortunately, it's just that technical limitation. It's very difficult to get this rich kind of baked in data for the buoyancy stuff, and also be able to update that in a quick way where you can have your vehicles shapes getting changed and potentially broken in two. Next question, will weapons get an update so more barrels increase accuracy? So I think more barrels do increase accuracy with the longer things, but as we already discussed in the previous stream, we are planning on improving your accuracy for your weapons anyway. We'll see when that happens, hopefully this year. Are there any updates on the rail blocks? Yes, you did ask about this. We did discuss it. We've kind of decided against it, I think. No, I can't remember. We did discuss it. What happened? I can't give you a quick answer on that. I'm afraid you're going to have to wait and see. I think it might still be on the board. We might be planning on doing something, because it would be cool to have, like, I suppose it is tricky, but it would be good to be able to like unload trains and stick them on a transport vehicle or whatever, but you could kind of already do that if we just allowed train blocks to be detachable. I think it would be quite good if that was the case, if you had a node for releasing train wheels or something, so that you could potentially lift a train off the tracks and stick it on a boat, move it to the other island, unload it or whatever. It's the kind of thing that you should be able to do in Stormworks, really. The specific rail blocks for making stuff, I mean, it would be cool for stuff like it's a dynamic rail, isn't it? I don't know. It's a bit up in the air. I can't give a particularly positive answer to that, to be honest. It may not be happening, but with the location stuff I discussed before, if we can support more location modding, it might be possible to place your own railway lines down in the same way that I think the modders are currently able to do so by modding the map files. It might be possible to add your own rail that way, but rail pieces for vehicle I am not sure about. Probably not, but it could still happen. Sorry, I can't commit to anything. Can we have an option to bump up the resolution of smaller screens, like the 1x(n), 2x3 screens? Well, I mean, the problem with this, right, is that it invalidates all the existing screens if suddenly screens are a different resolution. I suppose you do have the trick that some players use where they film a bunch of screens and put it on the screen. Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible that we could set it to be programmable. I think it's just the stress is just the performance impact, because rendering these screens is a little bit on the expensive side, and some of the Lua scripts are also a bit on the expensive side, and ultimately we just want to make sure that the game is getting a reasonable performance in the most possible cases, and the more opportunities we give players to create something that is very slow, it means there's more opportunities for, I mean, us to have to be asked, oh, can you improve the performance of this aspect, which is something we're just trying to, I guess, constrain things a little bit to make it more difficult to make stuff that breaks the game. so there is performance impact. I will add it to the list. I think we might have discussed this before and decided that the performance impact was too great to do it, but we'll discuss it again. Screen resolution option. Okay, let's carry on, thank you. And will there be a setting for disabling compressed gases? No. I think we're trying to move away from the setting stuff. We did remove advanced basic mode a while ago, didn't we? And it's better that you're getting stuff off the workshop and you don't have to then go and start changing the settings for your creative settings in order for the vehicle to work. It's just best that that isn't a thing. Will the train tracks be remodeled? I think you're probably asking for higher resolution stuff with like ballast and sleepers and so on, and I think increasing the poly count just for train tracks and then the rest of the world being this low poly thing doesn't really make sense. I think it wouldn't look right because you'd have like some parts be detailed that would look like it had been made by two different artists, and then also there's the graphics performance impact there of having a lot more polygons, so I think that's probably best that we don't do that. Next question, if you had to do Stormworks over again, what's the most substantial thing you'd change? It's a great question. I love to think about this stuff. There's so many things that where we feel like the fundamentals would be better to change. I think ultimately the biggest fundamental thing with Stormworks, I think I'm not a big fan of the workbench. I look at other building games like loads of our competitors, right? Like Space Engineers, Scrap Mechanic. These games you're building in first person and there's no specific workbench. You're building in first person in the world with components in a kind of continuous thing. Stationeers is a great example, and you just kind of create this kind of like survival gameplay, I suppose, in that sense, in that you can modify your vehicle anywhere, but likewise there's kind of relation to you creating something where you're not necessarily just going in and respawning it, and you start to get this kind of like, I guess, the compatibility with a survival game. And I think that's fundamentally probably the thing that I would most like to change. It would fundamentally change what Stormworks is, but you suddenly start to engage with these different design aspects. That Stormworks is a designing game. You're designing stuff, and I think a lot of the players are obviously design oriented. They are designers, and that's the joy of Stormworks, is that for many players it's a gamification of the design process, and I think if you look at real design, a huge amount of real design is how things are built. How is something actually going to be built in the real world, because you can design things that are actually impossible to construct, and that's a big part of engineering. And then there's, I suppose, just the relationship of your vehicle and the world. I think the whole concept that people never refuel their vehicles because they just go back to workbench to refuel their vehicle, I think that sucks. I think it'd be great to be designing these vehicles and pushing the aspect of the vehicles being used more and more and more, because you're already getting players really engaging with the part of the joy of Stormworks vehicles is that you do go on, you crew them and you use them, and you go to different rooms to do different things, and there's different stations, and then when you're designing things you're thinking about what am I doing in that position, and what are the controls I need, and what are the best design aspects for improving that situation for players. That's just my thought on that stuff. I can see in the chat someone likes the workbench, and you get the mirroring tools, and there's all sorts of tools in the workbench that make designing a bit easier, or a lot easier in some cases, and it's got that kind of CAD interface, and it's a trade-off. I think what I'm suggesting of saying, that's a bit of a regret, I've got to acknowledge that some parts of the game would definitely be better, but some parts of the game would actually be worse as well. Such is true with everything. So thank you for the great question. I did enjoy answering that one. Will the multiplayer player limit be increased? No, I don't think so. I think I mean, the problem with the multiplayer stuff really isn't the number of players, it's the number of vehicles. But I think you can go up to 32 at the moment. I don't think we should really be increasing it beyond that. I think there's just the what's the point, because you can only have a certain number of vehicles and only so many players can crew a single vehicle. All the vehicles are being simulated on the server. It's kind of necessary for the Stormworks networking architecture to work that way, and that just does mean there's this kind of choke point of performance that if you've got a lot of players and they're all spawning their own vehicles, then it's just gonna be a disaster. So I think it's up to server owners to decide what the appropriate player count is for their setup, because servers are run different ways, and some servers you can spawn stuff and some servers you can't, and there's like roleplay servers, and then there's just join and spawn servers and so on, and so there's different appropriate max player count for different servers, but I'll probably say 32 is probably the reasonable max for any context. Will cooling and heating of compartments be a thing? I think it is at the moment. I think we did add that in. I think that heaters heat the contents of the fluid inside your compartment, which is often the air. I'm not sure. I'll note that down. I'll discuss with the players if it isn't, but I think it might already be. Compartment temperature. I thought that was already based on the temperature of the gas and the gases and any liquid inside the compartment. So I think it already is a thing, but it's really hard to know for sure without going and reading some code. When will the monitor resolution be increased? I think we've already answered that one, thank you. Will jet engines get more thrust at some point? Probably not. I think they are already pretty overpowered. I think they're the most powerful engine at the moment, so probably not. Happy to consider if stuff isn't, but I think there's plenty of examples on the workshop of very, very fast vehicles that are jet engine powered. I think usually if they're super fast, they are jet engine powered. Will we ever get alternative fuels for engines like hydrogen, CNG? This question does seem to come up every one. We have answered this last time. The answer is probably not, and that's because it doesn't really add anything to the game. We could add, we do have hydrogen in the game already. We don't have a hydrogen oxygen engine. Yes, we do. We've got the liquid fuel engine. So you've got the liquid fuel engine, so you do have your hydrogen stuff. I don't know if you're talking about something else. CNG, I don't know if what that is. That's not LPG, is it? I don't know what CNG is. But certainly we asked for petrol quite a lot, and I'd kind of say, well, from a game point of view, how is anyone, we could add the word petrol in, but mechanically it's going to be the same, so we're kind of resistant to adding stuff to the game that isn't a mechanical change, because I think Stormworks is all about mechanics, and I don't think it would be that different to make diesel engines versus make petrol engines. And sorry, I don't know what CNG is. Are there any updates planned that would improve the automated situation? There's the grip wheel stuff that I did discuss before. We haven't done it yet, but we would like to have another look at that. I think that is the main thing really that is going to improve vehicles a lot. Next question, will you add more ammo for the light machine gun for aircraft? The answer, I don't. Making the ammo box bigger for the light machine gun specifically. Yes, we will. I think someone asked that last time. We did mark it down. We are planning on doing that. Haven't done it yet. Could get cancelled. Hopefully not. Hopefully we'll do that for you. Any chance to increase the build size at docks without us having to mess with the game files? No. I think the build size really, it doesn't make sense for us to change that and make it easy for players to make vehicles that will crash the game, because then obviously the players are very right to come to us and say, hey, the game's crashing, all I did was what you can do in the game just by creating this vehicle. And I would say it's going to be possible to make very valid vehicles with a larger edit grid, and that it's not guaranteed to work. It is working for a lot of players, but for some players with certain specs, we did discuss this in detail last time over how memory works and so on. For some players, it will crash a lot, and that will be our fault. So I think we've set the max edit grid size to be what we think is kind of responsible. We don't really want to make it too much bigger for the reasons I just discussed. Are fishing nets testing for sales? I mean, fishing nets, sales, you can see the relation there, haven't you? We didn't really think about it at the time. There is the kind of obvious follow on there, I suppose. I guess the challenge is the stuff I discussed last time. It's the physics, isn't it? It's the water's a bit treacly. How well a sailboat's going to work? Are they just going to immediately topple over because the wind pushed on the sail a bit? I don't know. So many players have asked for sails. We'd love to do it. It's just a question. We don't want to do it and do it badly. So would be cool, wouldn't it? Triangular sail, I don't know. I mean, you can have basically a triangular net if you put two of the nodes really close together, can't you? It'd be cool. We're not working on sails at the moment. We could do in the future. It's a great update idea. Doing the nets does make us closer to sails, but does it make it something that we can do and make players happy with us? We'll see. Page 3, how are we doing? I'll go on for a few more minutes. I'm sorry, there's going to be some that I don't get to, aren't there? But I'll just try and answer as many as I can still. Are the creations used in the snapshots posted anywhere? Yes, take all of the creations that get posted in the announcements. They're in the Discord, they're in the vehicle showcase panel. If you want to get featured in a vehicle announcement update that happens on Wednesdays, then we're doing the announcement updates at 5 PM on Wednesdays. We typically harvest screenshots from earlier in the day on Friday, sometimes Thursday afternoon. It just depends when we write the announcement. So do post your screenshots in vehicle showcase channel on the Discord, and we're always looking for stuff there. Typically the format, we do prefer the bigger images, and typically we prefer stuff that it doesn't have borders or logos on and stuff, just to kind of keep it consistent with our styling. But I mean, I'm sorry that I don't get to feature everyone's stuff. There's so much amazing creations getting posted in the vehicle showcase. I always enjoy Wednesday looking through them, and there's always incredible vehicles that would have been the number one choice like a couple of years ago, but the standard just keeps going up. The vehicles the players creating are just so good. Unfortunately I can't feature them all. But thank you very much to everyone who's posting the vehicle showcase. It's great to look at your vehicles, and it makes the game look great on a Wednesday in the announcement. So thank you very much for that. Would you consider adding farming? We would, but it's not on the board right now, and we do have to ask ourselves, is it a good idea in terms of further diluting, I suppose, the focus of Stormworks? A lot of players have asked about search and rescue content and so on. We're going to carry on working on the game, obviously, and I think for the foreseeable future. It's just that, is farming the next thing? But the farming creations, right? Like all the farming vehicles you can build, it will be quite fun. I do like the idea. It's something we've discussed. It's definitely not being worked on, I'll promise you that. Definitely not this year. Could happen at some point. It's a big update. Could be a few major updates. Could be a DLC. I'm just thinking ideas. I really don't know. Next question, will there be colour sensors for autonomous vehicles? The challenge here is that we need to be able to sample the colour. That has to happen on the CPU. You can't read data back off the GPU. It's just something you mechanically can't do. It's but it's a performance problem. You can't read the data, so we'd have to set up all the game data so that we can then go and query geometry and so on the CPU. That's not a straightforward thing to do. You start having to basically do a big technical thing that we just don't have any other use for in the game, which is why you can't have a color sensor in the game at the moment. It's technically, there's a lot of work to do just that simple function. I have a lot of ideas for career missions. What's the best for those? Definitely the issue tracker. Please open a feature request. Please try and keep it, I guess, to the point. We do like the detail, but certainly, yeah, just a clear worded feature request on the issue tracker is always appreciated. Thank you so much. Can we have some sort of Doppler effect implemented? Oh, the good old Doppler effect. No, I don't think so. It's kind of like a niche physics thing, isn't it? I don't think we're going to do every single physics phenomenon. It is kind of a classic thing we get asked for, and I think we're better staying to the clear scope of what is within the scope of Stormworks and what isn't. I would say that's probably outside of the scope. Do you plan to add more windows / module windows? Not really. Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? Could do. Already got a pretty extensive list of windows. Players do use the XML editing, and that is in many ways quite a good solution to that problem. So I think official support with more windows is... I know it always seems nice to just have more stuff, have more components, and it be in there and stock and easy. Sometimes it can kind of be detrimental to the game where we're just piling more and more components on, and I think the existing Windows set is kind of, in a sense, complete in that it's kind of clear what the scope of the Windows set is there, and obviously there's not every possible window, but the ones that are there, it kind of makes sense that set is complete, and the ones that aren't there, well, the entire set isn't there for certain like angles and stuff. So I would probably suggest that we've kind of got a reasonably clear set of windows in at the moment. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a good idea for us to start to add more and more scope to the windows, and certainly the there's the technical issue where the rendering with these 1x2 slopes and stuff isn't going to work, so you kind of get the water clipping through windows in some situations and so on, so we're trying to avoid that. So it's complicated, and I think you can do a lot of stuff with existing windows. Obviously we don't have every single possible imaginable block, but we do have over 650 blocks in the game at the moment. I think there is a lot of blocks. We could add more and more, but it kind of makes the game difficult to use because then you're just forever looking for the block you want as well. So there's always design balance there, and I think most of that is a design constraint. Let's carry on. Why you can't add new block and wedges? You promise it in 2018, and today it was not implemented. I don't think I did promise it in 2018. I mean, I probably did, right? Like, this isn't my first dev Q&A. I've said a lot of things in this chat. I think I normally do precurse things to say these are our intentions. I think we're being as transparent as we can do. We don't want to talk about stuff and give players false hope on stuff, but likewise we don't want to be negative about stuff and then go and implement it later on. I would say that it's very unlikely that we did actually promise anything, but you know, maybe I did say something. I've said a lot of stuff. We've been in live development. We're in our 7th year. I've certainly delivered on a lot of promises. I think we're doing pretty well. Can you add more sound effects to engines like a drop-down menu since you don't plan on adding more? I think that is meant to say. Again, the engine sound effect stuff is a problem for us. Future file modding support could potentially allow you to change the sound effects on stuff. If we get around to doing that major update, that would be pretty cool, right? It would be similar to some of the existing file mods that you currently get with, I think it's Storm Loader. It's kind of pushing a bunch of that stuff. I don't know if that's the way it's done at the moment, but it's that kind of style of modding that could potentially make a lot of sense to get that stuff working on the workshop, so that players could actually create mods of sounds themselves if they want a specific engine effect. I've already discussed the sounds and the challenges previously in this stream. Will new improvements to other engines, jet engines, seem outdated? Will they get an overhaul? Jet engines seem outdated. Will they get an overhaul? From White Noise, thank you for the question. I don't know. I mean, you know, we're just in the territory of having to basically deprecate the existing engines and create a whole new set, and I mean, for some players that makes sense. For other players, it's very annoying because they know how the jet engines work. I think it's difficult to make a positive impact on a live serviced game with some of these changes, particularly when the jet engines aren't necessarily not working. They do work as the specified, and there's certainly improvements. There's certainly ways that we'd want to do it differently in the future. I'd like to see jet engines in a future game, I will say that. I don't know whether necessarily taking stuff out of Stormworks, then changing it and adding it back in is necessarily a good idea for the general experience of players. I've talked about it earlier in the stream. It's really difficult to put into words, but we're just stuck between a rock and a hard place on this stuff. We want to make your improvements, and we agree that there are improvements to be made, but it's difficult for us to change stuff because it breaks players' vehicles. I don't know. Oh my god. Okay, let's carry on. Why do you use weird units like turns instead of radians or degrees? So I think we're trying to avoid the Stormworks being too sciencey, I suppose. So, and also we don't want Stormworks to be too real-world physics stuff. I think we discussed this stuff in the past. Degrees, I think, is common used. Radians, I mean, you've got to be a maths professor to know radians, right? I mean, not a maths professor, but you know, it's like radians are a bit hardcore. Degrees, I think, are more commonly used at school and stuff, but we've used turns just because it's a bit more of a generic and easy to understand value, and it was also, when we were adding it, it was compatible with the existing, like before we had all the data logic systems and stuff. In early Stormworks, you'd have like the throttle lever, and you'd be controlling, you know, your rudder with the steering wheel and the throttle lever, and that stuff was going -1 to 1. So it was also in a similar kind of range to the values that you might want to use anyway, without necessarily making it more difficult to make vehicles. But yeah, you know, radians and degrees are a more common unit. I don't think it really matters as long as that it's clear what the unit is. I think that's the important thing. And atmospheres, again, we just picked atmospheres. It seemed to be the most easy to understand. One atmosphere is what you're breathing right now. It's just easy to understand, and I think we're just trying to make it a bit more accessible. I don't think it really matters what unit we use as long as we're consistent. So that we're just trying to be consistent with that stuff. Could you please add composite output to net anchors? Net anchor composite output. We'll discuss it. Can't hurt, can it? It's easy to do. We'll discuss it, and we'll look at what the priority of it is, and no promises, but seems like a reasonable request. When will you implement a Linux dedicated server support for Stormworks? We will not. Just quickly touch on that. I think it's frustrating with, I mean, you can probably just run it using Wine, to be honest. It probably works. We're not, on some platforms we've just had compatibility issues. It's incredibly frustrating for us with the OpenGL issues that we're just constantly getting, where we've not changed the game, but suddenly there's a big group of Intel graphics users or AMD graphics users that the game doesn't work for. Or where the game still works, but the game performance problems. That's a problem we've got on Stormworks on Carry Command 2 at the moment, and it's very, very frustrating because we've not changed the game. It's AMD who's changed the drivers, and the game starts playing differently, and it's because OpenGL is an older API now. It wasn't when we started making Stormworks, but as I've said, 7th year of live development, things have changed over the years, and they're basically withdrawing support. Certainly on Mac it's no longer officially supported, so that's just a little bit of a challenge there, and to be honest, I don't know whether our next game will be on Mac for that very reason, that we're just not having fun with the poor support, like the Apple M1, M2, M3 drivers. The graphics drivers break frequently. They do fix them, to be fair, but we do just get these feature requests. It's frustrating for us to not be able to deliver really high quality experience for every player, because that's what we want to do, and it's frustrating when we can't, and it's nothing we can do about it because it's related to the graphics driver that the player has and so on. So I think with the Linux stuff, that's just going to be like that but worse, right? So I think we just want to focus on less platforms, not more. You can probably get it to work through Wine though, but it's not officially supported. Will the game get low-end computer support? I mean, I think it does. At this point, we haven't changed the spec requirements since we released. So I guess the problem is these low power laptops, right? Where you've just got a lot of low power laptops on the market where they are slow because their CPU is one of these low power ones. They don't have a heatsink on, and often they're the ones where they've got the turbo mode where they'll go up to 3 gigahertz, but they'll do it for 2 seconds, and then they're back down to like 1.2 gigahertz, and that's probably quite slow. And it works for a lot of a lot of consumers where they're only going to surge in demand for a very small amount of time. But I think the performance issue that player is probably talking about there is low power laptops. And unfortunately, they haven't been getting very much. They haven't been getting a lot faster over the years. It would be great to improve the performance for everyone, but the minimum specs on Stormworks are pretty low. But yeah, I do acknowledge that some players are getting performance issues on low power laptops, these budget laptops that are very, very popular, that have integrated graphics and then also don't have very good cooling. I think the game does typically work, but then if you want to spawn large vehicles as well, then you suddenly get the mismatch between one person's good performance is another person's bad performance because they want to spawn the biggest vehicle on the workshop as well. So it's difficult to answer that one, but I would say it's actually possible to play Stormworks on a lower end PC. I think you just got to keep in mind that you might not be able to spawn the biggest vehicles. I will carry on as best I can. Possibility for handheld end effectors for logic on off number like a keypad or something. Possibility for handheld end effectors for logic on off a number like a keypad. Oh, I see. So you kind of want to have like a handheld tool. The handheld items are a bit of a pain. I mean, it's possible. That's the first time I've seen that requested, so I think it would have to be a frequent request because these handheld items are a bit of a pain to add. So it'd have to be a popular request. It's just a little bit difficult. That does take us to the end of page 3. I'm sorry, there are still some questions I've not had the time to answer. I think we should probably end it there. However, thank you very much to everyone who has turned up. Sorry to those who didn't get your questions answered. I think we possibly got through 2/3 to 3/4 this time. My apologies if you're in the last third or 25% of questions that we've not had time to answer. There will be more, so please don't forget, if you haven't had your question answered, we will do more sessions. I'm enjoying these. I think they're good fun. It's a great way to get information to players and to interact in a completely, I suppose, open and free way where you can all see what questions you've answered and what questions have been asked and so on. I think it's quite productive, and I'd just like to finish by thanking certainly everyone who's taken the time to turn up. It's very kind of you to take your time to come and listen to me talk. That's awesome. It's an honor, and then thanks to the many players who are making Stormworks work. Thank you. If you're taking the time to play Stormworks, that means a lot to us. We are game developers, and it's not all about making money. It's about making games that I think connect with people who are like-minded, and we really enjoy that. There's also, I suppose, the creators that we've got to thank, who at the workshop is just incredible. I get so much joy just from looking at the workshop, but some of the vehicles take an incredible amount of time. They're an incredible achievement. Thank you very much for sharing those with us. And not just the vehicle creators, the content creators. I watch a lot of content. I can see 454 still in the chat. I watch a lot of the YouTube. I watch a lot of Stormworks YouTube, and I do enjoy a great deal of it. There's too many of you to thank, but know I'm enjoying plenty. I can see Prof Incognito as well. I do watch plenty of Prof Incognito. Obviously, there's the Komodo guys and OB and Spy, and then there's Captain Cockerel stuff is awesome too. There's loads of sorry if I didn't mention you, because there's just so many fantastic YouTubers. I really appreciate it all, and the content's great. Thank you to the community guys, the people helping in Discord, answering questions. Thank you so much. It's very generous of you to spend your time that way helping other players. I know the players appreciate it, but I just get a lot of reward just seeing players interacting with each other and learning stuff. It's just awesome. And thank you to the development team as well. They are working very hard. I'm not doing that much of the development. We've got a team of 8. They are doing a lot of hard work, and they do really care about the players and the experience, and they're taking a lot of time, and they do care. So thank you to that, because it means a lot to them as well. So thank you from all of us. Thank you for joining the stream, and I will see you in the next stream. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
All right, guys. So that was a really good Q&A. A lot of good questions there. Quite a bit of detail that Deltar's went into with a bunch of those questions. So I'm not going to go too far into this right now. What I'm going to do is I have this all recorded. I'm going to... Last time I had an issue where the stream cut out. We didn't have the stream cut out this time. So what my plan is to do is to go through question by question. I'm going to put out short-ish videos. So hopefully a couple minutes. That way I can get them on TikTok as well. And I'll go through each question, Deltar's answer. So if you want to look up a specific question, you can do that. So go ahead and look for that in the near term. I'll also put in some of my thoughts on that. But just kind of going over some of these things. Really good questions. Let me just very quickly go over some of them. He answered my question, which was lovely. Last time he kind of poo-pooed it, which I understand. I didn't ask it in a great way last time. A little bit more clear and concise. You only have a couple sentences you can ask. My question was essentially, could you put in a container port up at Tajin? My whole thought process is we don't really have enough airplane content. You can build airplanes and you can fly from base to base, but you kind of have to make up some of that content yourself. For example, right now, if you guys have been watching the streams, I've been making a VTOL airplane to move containers, and pretty much need that because you can't land at an airport and easily move a container. So hopefully that might come to fruition with a container port at Tajin. We can go from FJ to Tajin with just airplanes. That would be kind of cool. A lot of good answers there. Some that stuck out to me, I'll go over real quick. Kind of my supposition with some of the reason why, the rationale why they balanced the fluid update the way it is. Again, we've been kind of going to the controversy lately of ships don't sink. As you can see in the video, the ship sank. But, Deltar talked about it, and that was kind of my guess, and it was a guess at the time, and Deltar has kind of reinforced that guess, was, it's a balancing thing. They don't want the ship to sink too fast. They have to make the game easy enough for for example, an 8-year-old player who has no physics understanding or engineering background whatsoever, and they need to make the game in depth enough for somebody like me who really likes to get into that minutia. And so it seemed like when they were making the balancing pass for the pressurization update, they had to make some choices. How fast are we going to allow water and air into a doorway, for example? And if they let it in too quickly, your ship sinks very, very fast, and it could be quite annoying as you accidentally open up a door and boom, your ship's at the bottom of the ocean. Boo, your whole play session is ruined. You might have been out there for hours doing rescues, and now your ship's at the bottom of the ocean, and you might not be able to rescue it. And you can imagine that would be very off-putting. And so they have to come up with a balance. The other thing is, like, talking about moon pools, that was an advertised feature with the pressurization update because players had been asking for it. And so one of the reasons, my hypothesis of why if you have a door on the top or the bottom, the flow rates are very slow, is generally a moon pool is a door on the bottom of the ship. Now imagine if you open the door to the moon pool room and you forgot to shut the door out to the outside. Well, that water is going to rush in so fast, unless you get that door shut in the moon pool room pretty damn quick, you're going to sink your boat. And if you shut that door with you inside, you're going to drown. And especially in a career game where you might not be able to respawn, that could be the end of your play session again. So I think it's a balancing pass. They have to make some decisions where some players are going to be happy with the decisions, other players are not going to be happy with the decisions. And that's kind of the whole, that's all compromise. You know, it's the heart of compromise. Nobody is ever 100% happy, but everybody can kind of still play. You know, and so, you know, I would like the game much more complex, but I understand other people, that would be very off-putting. So, you know, it's always a balancing thing, and they're going to have to get that just right. A lot of good things in there. Some of the guys from our community, you know, got their questions answered too, which was nice. The dualies. Deltar wants to put dualies in. I can work with some of these guys from the community. I'll get in touch. I want to make some videos, kind of. Deltar has been very receptive to some of our videos that explain what we like. You know, he brought it up in this video. He talks about he needs to get enough support from the community to do something. You know, they can't spend 6 months on something and have it benefit 5 players. They need enough of the community to support that feature to add it into the game. And so, for example, I'm going to make some videos where we talked about some things that could be added to the game. And if you guys support the videos and share them and show them and even like them, the devs can see which videos are popular, devs can see which videos are not, and they can tell, okay, this is a feature players want, this is a feature players are talking about, this is one they're not talking about, that one's not as important than the one that players really want. And so, you know, again, Deltar has a pretty good understanding of some of these mechanical things, but he, you know, this is his job as a software developer. He doesn't drive trucks, he doesn't, you know, operate ships, he doesn't operate trains, so he's not going to have an exhaustive knowledge of all these different areas. So, you know, we have some great people in the community who are, like myself, airplane experts, trucking experts. We have people who are ship experts, train experts, and so if we can put coherent gameplay ideas together and demonstrate to the developers that, hey, this will be reasonably easy to implement in the game, a lot of people will get joy out of it, and it will not break the game. Those are all important things. You know, another thing that is important that Deltar has talked about is, and it was kind of my hypothesis, is they're not going to go in the game and break the game, you know, quote unquote, break the game or break a lot of workshop stuff again. The community, to a certain extent, was unreasonable with their response to pressurization. Some, you know, I think it was a small amount of people, a very small amount of people that were unreasonable, but, you know, the devs got stung by that. And, you know, so I don't think they want to go back and do big physics changes that are going to potentially break huge swaths of the workshop so that people have to rebuild their builds. You know, I think the ones they've done so far are pretty reasonable. I think in a small amount of time you can fix your build, but it is frustrating to a lot of players. And so I think the likelihood of them going back and, for example, quote-unquote, fixing aerodynamics, making big aerodynamics changes. You know, some people want to be able to glide. As a commercial pilot, I have never, you know, flown in a plane that actually glided in my life. I've done it simulated in the simulators many, many times, and it's not something that I think a lot of people have an actual grasp of what it's really like. You know, a glider will glide really well. Most airplanes do not glide very well. We had a saying with multi-engine aircraft, the second engine is there to get you to the site of the crash. That's if you have 2 engines and one engine goes out in a small twin-piston aircraft, the other engine is unlikely to get you back to an airport unless you're really close. So people who think that gliding is this magic thing that you can just glide wherever you want, it's really not. And I think the devs are highly unlikely to rip the whole game apart, break a huge swath of stuff in the workshop, just so that 5 people can go glide airplanes if they want. You know, so I think his answer is really good. You know, one thing I do like that he does is you could see him change his mind live, where he's like, you know, we really weren't thinking of that, and then he adds it to the list. You know, and I think he really does have a love for building and survival, and, you know, he sees something cool and he wants to add it. You know, he was talking about some of the engineering videos he watches and how he, you know, would love to add some of this cool stuff, but again, from a design perspective, they have to think about what's this going to take a toll in the game. You know, will people be able to handle it? Will the file size increase? Will the engine of the game be able to take it? Another important takeaway, he said it multiple times now. I hope we can put it to bed. I used to have people saying, oh, Stormworks is dying, Stormworks is dead, they're working on the new game, they're not working on this game. Again, he reiterated, Stormworks is intended to be around for the foreseeable future, for a long time. This is their main product. They're not abandoning it, they're sticking with it. I watched a video on Kerbal Space Program 2 right before this, actually. And, you know, so those people who might be saying, oh, I want Stormworks 2. It's easy to say that. It's not necessarily the best idea. This happened with Kerbal Space Program 2. You know, you have to make the new product, the new game that people are going to pay for. You have to be able to add enough that people are going to want to spend another full game price on. And sometimes you get a bunch of disgruntled customers who say, hey, this isn't enough stuff for me to do this. And so they literally have, like Deltar said, they've worked on this game for 10 years. They'd have to start over and do that much work again to get Stormworks 2 up to the level of Stormworks 1. I don't think it's worth it, frankly. I think this game has an art style that's timeless. It has gameplay that is timeless. You could play this, like, if the game, like, stopped adding features tomorrow, you could play it forever. You know, you'd be able to still engineer and build all sorts of cool craft and build new stuff and never, you know, even if they didn't make a new design for a vehicle ever again in the real world, you could still build every craft that has ever been designed. You know, so I don't think we need a new Stormworks. You know, he talked a couple times about the quote-unquote, the new game. It's going to go alongside this game, and it's going to be more narrow in focus. You know, so some of the people who say, oh, Stormworks is supposed to be a rescue game. Again, it's build and rescue. It's supposed to be what they add to it. And so, and you know, the community has asked for things, and the devs have added those. That's what they intend the game to be. So they intend for mining. They intend for shooting. They intend for going to space. These are things that are supposed to be in the game because they put them in the game. And so you need to understand that a game with narrow focus brings a small audience. And so likely this is going to remain their big game to draw in a lot of people. It draws in the train crowd, the plane crowd, the boat crowd, the space crowd. You know, it brings in all those different players, and the construction and the mining crowds. You know, hopefully farming he brought up. You know, not soon, but that would be something you could add. So you can imagine all the great things they could add. So, like, if I were to guess, like, what the next game, or the game that will go alongside Stormworks would be, you know, he talks about it being a more focused building game. You know, you could imagine, for example, let's say it is just search and rescue. A lot of people who bought the game for search and rescue wish that was what would happen here, but the problem is you have to keep paying if you want just a search and rescue game to exist, because there's not enough people who will just play a complicated search and rescue game to keep the game financed. So what you end up having to do is keep asking people for more money because the audience is too small. Stormworks has a large enough audience that you can have somebody who loves trains, who starts playing this game, who's never touched a boat their entire time, and the payment they've made for the game allows you to fly airplanes and never touch a train. You know, and so as a community, we can support the game together. If you go to a focused game, that game is small. It's going to have a small amount of revenue because, again, you're pulling from a smaller number of people who will buy it. And so I think that's what they're leaning towards more. He talks about it being of higher quality. That doesn't necessarily mean, you know, the quality is bad here, but it's kind of that whole thing where when you have a sandbox game, you can't go super in depth. The analogy I've made before was farming sim. Farming sim is a farming simulator. It's all about farming, you know, and so that can go very much in depth in that regime. Stormworks, let's say Stormworks adds farming. They'll never be able to go as in depth with farming as Farming Sim did for technical reasons, but also, you know, they can't spend like the 5 years that Farming Sim has spent on their game to add it as a small feature in their big sandbox game. And then the game file can't be huge. It can't make it so that, you know, the minimum specs get raised. But we can have some small farming stuff that will allow us to build some cool farming equipment and enjoy it, you know. And so I think that's good. I really, again, I love these Q&As. I think a lot of some great ideas from the community. Deltar seems really interested in putting them in. Some of the things, if you kind of listen closely, he talks about, like, you know, they have 6 months. They have a year planned out already. That's content for the next year, which is not unusual for a company to do. He did say that potentially farming may be DLC. Now, I kind of was hoping we'd get a DLC this year. I knew they said that we were not back in December. They kind of did it, I think, to focus on fixing the game up after Space DLC, kind of get a little break on that, you know, get the game tuned up a little bit. He talked about maybe a DLC for farming in the future, which would, you know, the earliest would be a year from this October, so October 25, I think, would be my first guess. But, you know, we need to have revenue keep coming the game, or else the game dies. That's just basics, because, you know, Deltar's talked about 8 people. You know, the filing showed 4, so it looks like they hired some people. So there's 8 people who need to bring in a salary, and it needs to be a competitive enough salary you can get good developers. So you need money to come in. It's basic economics, and so DLC is one of the ways to do it. You know, you either do a subscription model, you do microtransactions, which I don't think many of us want, or every once in a while you ask for what the cost of a sandwich is so that your favorite game can keep alive. And so I think that's perfectly reasonable, and I think that's a good sign. Some people will grumble about DLCs, but the benefit of a DLC, again, is it puts food in the mouth of the developers so they can keep going to work. And if that stops, they have to go do something else. Just basic economics. So sounds great. A lot of great things coming on here. I think we'll finish up again. I'm going to put out question by question. You know, there'll be short little videos, a couple minutes, however long it takes the question. I'll put in a little bit of commentary myself, so you guys can go ahead and look for those. I think what we'll do here is we'll close down the stream. I will take a short break, and then I will come back and we'll stream some Stormworks. But thank you guys for watching. A lot of great stuff from Deltars. Thank you, Deltars, for doing the Q&A. I really like this community engagement's good. He seems to be enjoying them, and he wants to do more of them. So, you know, that's really great. And thank you guys very much, and I will see you in the next one.